The sky was black with smoke, the ground shaking under heavy fire. Dust rose with every explosion, covering the battlefield like a suffocating blanket. In the middle of this chaos, she lay broken in the dust, her armor cracked, her weapon gone, her body weak. She could feel the heat of burning metal around her, smell the sharp bite of blood in the air. Her vision blurred, her breath shallow. She wanted to rise, but her strength had left her. Her people were scattered, her warriors defeated. All around, shadows moved. Enemies closing in, their steps heavy, their voices cruel. She heard their laughter, cold and merciless. She knew they were coming to finish what they started. Her heart raced, fear mixing with anger. She was supposed to be a warrior, trained since childhood to never surrender. Yet here she was, lying helpless on the ground, her blood mixing with the dust. Her eyes closed for a moment, ready to accept the end. And then, she heard it, a whisper, low and steady, a voice unlike any she had heard before. It cut through the noise of battle like a clear note in darkness. Rise, you are not alone. Her eyes snapped open. Confusion filled her mind. Who was speaking? She turned her head slowly, and there he was, a human, standing tall where no one else dared. His face was covered in dust and sweat, but his eyes burned with fire. She had heard of humans, weak creatures, too fragile for war. Her people often spoke of them as soft and breakable, yet this one did not look weak. He stood with courage in his stance, his weapon gripped firm, his gaze steady against the enemy. The enemies laughed when they saw him. A human? Alone? They mocked. But he did not move, he did not bend. Instead, he stepped closer to her, kneeling for only a moment, his voice calm. Can you stand? If you can stand, you can fight. If you can fight, you can live. She stared at him, disbelief filling her heart. Why would a human help her? Why risk himself for her? Yet something in his voice touched her. It was not just words, it was strength, it was defiance. The enemy drew nearer, their weapons shining with cruel light. She tried to push herself up. Her arms trembled, her legs weak. She fell back into the dust. Pain shot through her body. Her vision darkened again. But then, she heard him whisper once more, softer but stronger, "You are not finished, rise." Her body refused, but her spirit stirred. His whisper was like a spark in dry wood, a small flame growing. Her eyes met his again, and for a moment, she felt something she had never felt before. Not fear, not despair, but hope. He held out his hand, dust and blood covered it. But it was steady. She hesitated. She could hear the enemy almost upon them. She could hear their boots striking the ground. But she also heard his whisper, steady, unshaken. She reached out, slowly, painfully, and placed her hand in his. He pulled her up with surprising strength. For a moment, she swayed, her knees weak, but his grip did not let her fall. He stood beside her, tall against the storm. The enemies sneered, raising their weapons. But the human only smiled. Together, he said. Her heart pounded. Something inside her shifted. She was still weak, her wounds deep. But as she stood next to him, she no longer felt alone. The dust still choked the air. The fire still raged. The enemy still approached. But now, something was different. She had risen. The whisper had given her more than courage. It had given her strength to fight again. The battlefield had not claimed her yet. The enemies thought her broken. They thought her defeated. But they were wrong. With the human at her side, she was ready to face them, ready to fight again, ready to rise from the dust. She stood unsteady, her body aching, but her spirit no longer crushed. The human's hand was still firm in hers, strong and steady. He did not look at her with pity. He looked at her as if she were an equal, and that was something she had not felt in a long time. The battlefield stretched around them, fires burning, shadows shifting. The enemy soldiers were closing in, their laughter sharp. They mocked the sight of a wounded alien woman and a lone human standing side by side. But the human did not waver. His eyes were locked on the enemy, sharp and unbroken. She studied him for a moment, her mind still confused. Humans were supposed to be weak, soft, unfit for war. That was what she had always been taught. Yet this man was standing tall in the middle of hell. His chest rose and fell with heavy breaths. But there was no fear in him, only defiance. "Why?" she whispered, her voice hoarse. The question slipped from her lips without thought. Why was he here? Why was he helping her? His answer was simple. "Because you are not done," he said, his voice calm, like a steady flame, "and neither am I." Her heart stirred at those words. Something in his tone reached deeper than her broken body. It was as if he carried a fire within him, a fire that could not be killed. The enemy moved closer. One of them, tall and armored, raised his weapon. "The human dies first," he growled. His voice echoed like thunder. The human turned to her, his lips curved into a faint smile. "Can you walk?" he asked. She tried to step forward. Her legs shook, but she stayed on her feet. "I can walk," she said, surprising herself. "Then walk with me," he answered, his weapon lifted, his stance ready. The enemy charged. Their heavy feet pounded against the dust. The ground trembled with their approach. She clenched her fists, her strength weak, but returning. She felt the whisper still inside her, still burning. The first enemy swung his blade, but the human moved faster. His weapon cut through the dust, striking with precision. The alien soldier fell, shock frozen on his face. The others paused, surprised. She gasped, not at the fall of the enemy, but at the human speed. It was not brute strength, it was not reckless rage. It was control, calm and sharp like a blade. The enemy shouted in anger. They rushed forward again. She braced herself, ready to fall once more, but the human's voice cut through the storm. "Do not fear them. Fear is what they want." She breathed in deeply. For the first time, her fear lessened. His words steadied her. She raised her hand, grabbing a broken weapon from the ground. Its edge chipped, its handle cracked, but it was still a weapon. The human glanced at her, his eyes lit with approval. "Good," he whispered. Together, they stood. He fought with skill, striking swiftly. His movements were not those of a soldier trained for war, but of someone who fought because he had no other choice, a fighter born from survival, not from glory. She fought too, her strikes weaker, but fueled by something new. Every time her body wanted to give up, she remembered his whisper. She remembered his hand pulling her from the dust, and her strikes grew stronger. The enemy began to falter, their laughter gone, their confidence fading. They could not understand why a broken alien and a single human still stood, still fought. One commander shouted, "It is only one human. Crush him." But the soldiers hesitated. The human's defiance had shaken them. She realized something then. The human was not only fighting for himself, he was fighting for her, for everyone who had fallen. He was proof that even when the body is weak, the spirit can rise. She turned to him during a brief pause, her chest heaving. "Who are you?" she asked. He met her gaze, his expression unreadable. "Just a man who refuses to kneel," he replied. The words struck her like fire. They were simple, but they carried weight. In that moment, she understood he was not here because of orders. He was not here because of duty. He was here because he chose to be, and that choice made him stronger than the enemy could ever imagine. The dust swirled, the fires burned, the battle was far from over, but she no longer felt broken. She no longer felt alone. She was standing, she was fighting, and with a human by her side, she would not fall again. The battlefield groaned with smoke and ash. The air was thick, every breath heavy. Yet in that choking silence between battles, she felt something new inside her. It was not strength of the body, but strength of spirit, and it had begun the moment she heard his whisper. She tightened her grip on the broken weapon she had found. Her arms still ached, her wounds still bled, but her heart was no longer giving up. She looked at the human beside her, his stance firm, his eyes like fire. He did not waver. He did not bend. The enemies circled again, this time cautious, their earlier laughter gone. They had seen him fight. They had seen her rise from the dust when they thought she would die. And now they whispered among themselves, fearful of something they could not understand. He glanced at her, his voice calm but sharp. "Listen," he said, "do not swing blindly. Do not fight for me. Fight with me." His words sank into her like steel. She nodded slowly. Her people had always fought for leaders, for orders, but never had anyone asked her to fight with them, equal to equal, side by side. The enemy charged again, dust rising with their steps, their blades shining red with the glow of fire. She raised her weapon, fear still inside her chest, but she remembered his whisper, she remembered his hand pulling her up, and she swung. Her strike was clumsy, weak compared to theirs, but connected. A soldier stumbled back, shock flashing in his eyes. She gasped, surprised at her own hit. Her body trembled, but her spirit flared. The human moved like a shadow of flame, his weapon cut precise, his stance unbroken. He fought not like a soldier who trained for glory, but like a man who carried survival in his blood. Every movement was sharp, controlled, purposeful. Good, he called to her between strikes. Hold your ground. Breathe steady. Do not let them see your fear. She steadied her breath. The dust filled her lungs. The smoke burned her throat, but she held on. She struck again and again, her arms weak but growing steadier, her steps unsure but refusing to fall. The enemies grew frustrated. They had expected an easy kill, but instead they faced resistance. They faced defiance, and worse, they faced it from a human, one they had always considered too weak to matter. She noticed their fear. It was small, hidden behind anger, but it was there. The human had done this. He had made them fear. Between strikes, she looked at him, his jaw clenched, his eyes focused. He bled too, his face streaked with dirt and blood, but he did not stop. His voice, even in the middle of battle, carried steady. Stand tall, do not let them bend you. And she did. Her body screamed. Her wounds tore open with each movement. But she stood tall for the first time. She felt like her spirit was stronger than her pain. She realized then that his whisper was more than words. It carried something deeper. It carried defiance, a fire that spread. His voice was like a spark in the cold darkness, and that spark had lit her soul. The enemies hesitated now, circling but not attacking. Their eyes darted between her and him. They had crushed armies, broken warriors stronger than her, but they could not crush this pair, standing in the dust. Her chest heaved, sweat and blood dripping. But she raised her weapon higher. I will not fall again, she whispered. Not to him, not to them, but to herself. The human's lips curved into a faint smile. He nodded once, as if he had heard her even without sound. Good, he whispered back. The silence before the next attack stretched long. The fires crackled. The wind howled through broken stone, and in that silence, she knew the truth. She had risen because of him. But now she would fight not only because of his strength, but because of her own. Together, they stood in the dust. Together, they waited for the storm to come again. And when it came, they would rise to meet it, not as broken bodies, but as unbroken spirits. The battlefield shifted. Smoke curled into the sky like dark hands. The ground was littered with broken weapons and fallen bodies. The enemies had expected silence after their victory, but instead they heard something far worse for them. Resistance. Two figures stood where there should have been none. She and the human, side by side, bloodied but unbroken. Dust clung to their skin. Firelight reflected in their eyes. The sight made the enemy soldiers hesitate. It was not the strength of their weapons that unsettled them. It was the strength in their stance. Whispers spread through the enemy ranks. Soldiers muttered to one another, glancing nervously at the human. He fights like fire. One said, he will not fall. Another replied. Their voices carried fear they could not hide. The enemy commander stepped forward, towering in heavy armor. His voice thundered across the field. Enough, they are broken. They are weak in this. His tone was meant to command, but even his soldiers did not rush as quickly as before. Doubt had crept into their hearts. She saw it, their hesitation, their fear for the first time. The enemy looked less like monsters and more like frightened beasts. The human noticed too. His eyes narrowed, his lips curved into the smallest smile. He leaned closer to her, whispering, "Do you see it? They fear what they cannot crush." Her heart pounded. She gripped her cracked weapon tighter. She had never thought the enemy could fear. They were always merciless, always confident. But here they stood, uncertain, their eyes darting toward the human more than toward her. The commander roared in anger, trying to break the silence. He pointed his blade. "It is only one human. Nothing more. Tear him apart." The soldiers obeyed, but their steps lacked the old strength. They moved slower, their strikes less sharp. She felt it in every clash. Their will was breaking. The human fought as if he carried the weight of 1,000 warriors. His strikes were sharp, precise, controlled. Every move spoke not of training, but of choice. He fought because he refused to kneel, and that truth radiated from him like heat from a star. She followed his rhythm, her body still weak, but steadier now. Every time she thought she might fall, she remembered his whisper, remembered his fire, and she fought harder. Her weapon clashed, sparks flying. The commander watched, his expression darkening. This was not what he had promised his army. He had told them humans were fragile. He had told them victory was simple. But now, before their very eyes, one human was undoing that lie. The soldiers grew restless, some stumbled back, some looked to their commander for courage. But he gave them only rage. "Fools," he shouted, "do not fear him. He is flesh, he bleeds. End this now." But his words no longer carried power. They were heavy, empty, for the soldiers had already seen the truth. She felt her spirit rise higher. It was not just the human's whisper now. It was something inside her, awoken by his defiance. She raised her voice, shouting across the dust, "We are not broken." Her words rang louder than she expected, stronger, fiercer. The enemy soldiers froze for a breath. The commander's eyes narrowed. He could not allow this. He stepped forward himself, his blade massive, glowing red with heat. He marched toward them, fury shaking the ground. The human stood still, his voice steady. "Stay with me." He told her. She nodded, her fear still there, but her spirit stronger. The commander swung his blade. The force shook the air. The human blocked, sparks exploding. The impact rattled her bones, even though the strike was not aimed at her. But the human did not move. He held his ground, his arms straining, but unbroken. She gasped. His strength was not in his body. It was in his will. He would not bend. He would not fall. The commander stepped back, shocked for a moment. And in that breath of hesitation, the human struck. His blade cut across the commander's armor, leaving a scar of smoke and fire. The enemy soldiers cried out, some in rage, some in fear, but none could deny what they had seen. The human had wounded their leader. The commander roared, his pride wounded more than his flesh. But his soldiers no longer looked certain. Their fear grew. She could feel it. She could see it. The tide was shifting. She turned to the human, her chest heaving. "They are afraid," she whispered. He met her eyes, his voice quiet but sharp. "Good. Fear is the first crack, and once the crack is made, the wall will fall." And in that moment, she believed him. For the first time since the war began, she believed the enemy could be broken, not by strength of numbers, not by power of weapons, but by spirit, by defiance, by the fire of one human who refused to kneel. The dust still swirled, the ground trembling from the clash of steel. She stood beside the human, her chest heaving, her arms shaking. The enemy commander had been wounded, his pride torn, and his army unsettled. Yet the battle was not over. The soldiers still surrounded them, their weapons ready, their eyes full of doubt. She glanced at the human. His shoulders rose and fell with heavy breaths, blood dripping from a wound across his arm. But his eyes, those fire-lit eyes, remained steady. He looked at her, and in that look, there was no command, no demand, only trust. He whispered, just loud enough for her to hear, "We stand together, not as leader and soldier, but as one." The words struck her deeper than any blade. She had always fought under orders, always as part of a hierarchy where her life was expendable. But here, in this ruined field, a human had given her equality, a bond, not a chain. The enemy soldiers advanced again, hesitant but driven by fear of their commander. Blades rose, shields pressed forward. She raised her cracked weapon, but her strength faltered. Her knees trembled, her arms felt heavy. The human stepped closer, His shoulder brushed against hers. His presence steadied her like an anchor in a storm. "Breathe with me," he said, his voice calm even as death closed in. One breath, one strike, one step at a time. She inhaled slowly, matching his rhythm. Her chest steadied. Her grip tightened. Together they moved. His strikes were precise, cutting down those who came too close. Her movements, though weaker, became sharper as she followed his lead. At one moment, an enemy soldier broke through their defense. His blade swung toward the human's unguarded side. Without thinking, she lunged forward. Her broken weapon struck the soldier's arm, knocking his strike aside. The human turned swiftly and finished the fight. Their eyes met. His lips curved into a faint smile. "You saved me," he whispered. Her heart pounded. She realized the truth in his words. She had saved him. And it was not chance, it was choice. Just as he had chosen to help her, she had chosen to protect him. More soldiers attacked, and again they fought together. Their movements no longer clumsy or separate. They moved like one. He covered her when she faltered. She shielded him when his guard dropped. Every strike, every step, forged the bond stronger. The enemy commander watched in fury. His voice roared, "Do not fear them. They're only flesh. Kill them both." But the soldiers no longer believed him. Their strikes lacked certainty. Their steps slowed. Their fear grew. In that moment, she understood something. The human was not just strong because of his fire. He was strong because he shared it. He gave it freely. He lit others with his defiance. And that made him unstoppable. Her voice rose above the clash. "We will not fall," she shouted. Her words echoed. And for a heartbeat, the battlefield seemed to pause. The soldiers flinched. The commander's face twisted with rage. The human's voice followed, calm but powerful. "Together, we rise." She felt the fire in her chest, stronger than her wounds, brighter than her fear. This was no longer about survival. It was about defiance, about standing when the enemy demanded they kneel. She struck with new strength. Her weapon cracked further, but her spirit soared. Every strike was no longer just hers. It was theirs, bonded by fire and dust. The commander charged forward again, his massive blade glowing red, his fury shaking the ground. She braced herself, ready to be crushed, but the human stepped in front of her, his arms raised to block the strike. The clash rang like thunder, sparks exploding. For a moment, she thought he would fall, but she moved beside him, pressing her broken weapon against the commander's blade. Together, they held the strike. Together, they pushed back. The commander stumbled, shock flashing across his face. His soldiers gasped. And in that instant, she knew the bond between her and the human was more than chance. It was strength, strength the enemy could not understand. Her voice rose again, fierce and unbroken. "We are not alone," she cried. The words carried across the battlefield. And for the first time, she saw other survivors, hidden in the ruins, lift their heads, their eyes wide, their hearts stirred. The bond had spread. What had begun as a whisper had become a spark. What had become a spark was now a flame, and that flame was catching. The commander's roar shook the battlefield. His blade slammed against the ground, sparks flying. Yet his fury could not silence what had begun. The human and the alien woman stood side by side, and their defiance burned brighter than the flames around them. The soldiers hesitated. Their confidence wavered. For the first time, they saw their commander stumble, and they saw the two who refused to fall. The whispers grew louder, spreading from soldier to soldier. "They stand, they still stand." She felt the change in the air. It was subtle but powerful, a shift of spirit, a spark moving through the broken battlefield. She turned her head and saw figures stirring in the ruins, survivors who had hidden, broken and afraid, their eyes wide as they watched the human and her fighting together. The human noticed too, his voice low but steady. "They are watching us. If we rise, they will rise." Her heart pounded. She had never been a leader, never carried such weight. But when she looked into the eyes of those survivors, she understood they needed more than weapons. They needed hope. The commander charged again, his armor clanging, his blade heavy with rage. The human met him with a block, sparks bursting. She joined him, striking at the commander's side. Together, they forced him back step by step. The soldiers gasped, unable to believe their leader was being pushed. And then it happened. A survivor in the ruins stood. His body weak, but his spirit awakened. He lifted a broken spear and shouted, "We rise." His voice cracked but strong. Another followed, then another, until the ruins echoed with voices, "We rise, we rise." The enemy soldiers faltered. Their eyes darted between the growing voices and the human who still stood unbroken. Their hands shook on their weapons. Doubt filled their hearts. She felt strength flood her veins. Her wounds still burned, but her spirit soared. The bond between her and the human had spread like fire across dry fields, and now it was no longer just the two of them. It was many. The commander roared in fury. His strikes grew wilder, desperate. He swung with enough force to break stone, but the human blocked again and again. His arms trembled, his body bleeding, but his spirit would not bend. "Strike," the human whispered to her, his voice calm even as he held the commander's blade. "Now." She struck with all her strength. Her cracked weapon slammed into the commander's side. The impact echoed. The massive warrior staggered back, armor dented. For the first time, the commander looked uncertain. The enemy soldiers panicked. Their lines broke. Some stepped back. Others dropped their weapons. They could not understand how their unstoppable leader was forced to stumble by a human and a wounded alien woman. The survivors rushed forward, their broken weapons raised, their voices fierce. "We rise," they cried. The battlefield that had been silent with despair now thundered with defiance. The human stood tall, his chest heaving, blood dripping, his eyes burned with fire as he shouted, "Stand together, fight together." And they did. The survivors joined them, striking with courage they did not know they had. The enemy, once so sure of victory, found themselves being pushed back, their laughter gone, replaced by fear. She fought beside the human. Every strike matched his rhythm. Every step carried strength from their bond. She no longer felt broken. She no longer felt weak. With every cry of "We rise," she felt herself reborn. The commander stumbled again, his rage turning to desperation. He swung his massive blade wildly. But each time he struck, he was met not by one fighter, not by two, but by many. Together they held the line. Together they turned the tide. Dust filled the air. Blood stained the ground. But the truth was clear. The enemy had lost something greater than a battle. They had lost their certainty. Their fear grew as the humans' fire spread. The commander bellowed, his voice breaking the night. "This is not possible. You are only flesh. You are only dust." The human raised his weapon, his voice steady like stone. "We are more than flesh. We are more than dust. We rise." The words cut deeper than any blade. The survivors roared in answer, their spirits unbroken, their hearts united. And in that moment, the battlefield shifted. The tide had turned. The battlefield trembled under the weight of clashing voices. The survivors roared, "We rise," again and again. The sound was like thunder rolling through the dust. The enemy lines wavered, soldiers looking to one another with fear instead of courage. The commander stood at the center, his massive frame heaving, his armor dented, his pride broken. Rage burned in his eyes as he pointed his blade at the human and the alien woman. "You will not win. You are nothing. You are only dust." The human stepped forward, his body bleeding, his breath sharp, yet his stance never faltered. His voice carried across the battlefield, strong and clear. Dust rises, dust becomes storm, and storms cannot be stopped. The words spread like fire. The survivors cheered louder, striking their weapons against broken stone. "We rise," they shouted until the ground shook with their defiance. The commander charged, his blade glowing red, his fury desperate. The human met him head-on, steel clashing against steel. Sparks burst into the air. The impact echoed like a strike of lightning. She joined the fight. Her weapon cracked, but her will unshaken. Together, they pressed against the commander, step by step. The enemy soldiers froze, watching in disbelief. Their leader, the one they thought invincible, was being forced back by two warriors bound not by strength of body, but by strength of spirit. The commander roared again. His blade swung down like a falling mountain. The human caught it, his arms trembling under the force. His knees almost buckled, but he whispered through clenched teeth, "I do not kneel." She struck with all her strength. Her weapon slammed into the commander's side. The dent in his armor deepened. He staggered, his eyes wide. For the first time, he knew fear. The human seized the moment. His weapon cut forward with precision. The commander's blade flew from his hands, crashing into the dirt. Silence swept across the battlefield. The soldiers stared in shock. The commander dropped to his knees, gasping, his eyes filled with disbelief. "Impossible," he whispered. "A human cannot defeat me." The human stood tall above him, his chest heaving, his voice steady despite his wounds. Humans rise when others fall. That is what you never understood. The commander's roar broke into silence as he collapsed into the dust. His army, once fierce and proud, broke into chaos. Some fled, others dropped their weapons. None dared face the fire in the eyes of the human and the alien woman. The survivors stood together, their weapons raised. Their voices filled the air again. "We rise, we rise." The chant rolled across the battlefield like a wave, carrying victory in every echo. She looked at the human, her chest heavy, her body weak, but her spirit soaring. He met her gaze, his lips curved into the smallest of smiles. His whisper reached her once more, "You are not alone." Her heart stirred. She realized she was no longer the broken warrior who had fallen in the dust. She was reborn, not by her own strength alone, but by the bond they had forged. Together, they had turned despair into hope. The fires slowly dimmed. The dust settled. The battlefield grew quiet. What remained was not silence of defeat, but silence of survival, a new dawn breaking through smoke. She whispered back to him, her voice soft but steady, "And neither are you. Together, we rise." The survivors gathered around them, faces marked with blood and dust, but eyes shining with new strength. They had seen the truth with their own eyes. They had seen a human stand when no one else could. Word would spread. They knew it. This story would not end here. The galaxy would hear of it. The enemy would remember it. And their people would never forget. The human and the alien woman stood in the center of it all, side by side, not as broken warriors, but as symbols of defiance, their vow unspoken yet understood by all. The galaxy would soon learn the truth. Humans were never weak. They were the fire that lit others, the whisper that raised the fallen, the storm that rose from the dust. And on that battlefield, beneath smoke and ash, a new dawn began.